Save time, money, and resources on your BI investment. Cognos maintenance and upgrades with BSP software. Cognos content stores are now bigger than ever. In addition to Cognos global settings, configurations, content, and connections, the content store also holds saved outputs. With datasets, uploaded files, and data modules now available in Cognos Analytics, content stores are ballooning to sizes that no one ever expected. Because content store size affects content manager performance, it's important that administrators evaluate the content store and focus on opportunities to optimize performance. TechData's BSP software can help you evaluate your content store and prepare for an upgrade or to manage your already upgraded environment, where you can improve on the size of old or unused reports, the size of saved and dated report outputs, find and identify unowned or orphaned accounts, identify failing schedules and broken reports, and much more. MetaManager is uniquely positioned to allow you to do all this work in minutes and hours instead of days and weeks, putting money in your pocket and giving you extra space in your content store, not to mention a Cognos environment that just works better. When you free up space to make your environment work better, you also free up space for growth. So let's jump in and see how MetaManager can help you with your environment. MetaManager is a Windows installation that connects to your Cognos environment through the same Cognos credentials you're already using to connect to your environment. Using the gateway and dispatcher URL and your Cognos credentials, we connect directly to your content store. This ensures that we're using the same security and capabilities architecture already in place. We simply connect to an environment by selecting it from the dropdown, and we can see the whole of your content store, navigating all the way down to an individual report, schedule, or run history. One of the most important features when we're looking at maintenance or preparing for an upgrade is to make sure that your IBM Cognos licenses are in order. Depending on how many licenses of each type you have available, you can simply enter in those numbers and then run the IBM Cognos license audit. MetaManager will quickly run through your environment to identify which licenses are in order. In this case, I've received a notification that somewhere in my security architecture, I've got anonymous, all authenticated users or everyone in use. This means that I could have some significant security or license issues. Now that the license audit has run, I can see that I've actually got 10 administrative licenses, and I'm over on my analytics users as well. I'm doing okay on explorers and information distribution as well. So I can see who these users are, but I can also understand at the account level who the user is and what capabilities they have, both in and outside of the Cognos environment, that cause them to be identified as a particular level user. I can also go a step further to understand that full security lineage. So who is the user? What are their groups and role memberships? And then what capabilities are assigned along with that? For example, if we look at this user, Nancy, we can see some nested memberships. She's a member directly of the system administrators group, which gives her that administrative access, but also analysis users. As we scroll down, she's in the readers group. The readers group is part of the analytics users group, and so forth. So in this way, we can very quickly understand the whole of our Cognos environment. And if we see something we don't like, MetaManager has the ability to help us change this. I can simply right-click on the System Administrators group and hit Edit. I'm going to move over to the Security Editor module. I've now got my System Administrators group open. I can highlight Nancy, hit Delete, and remove her from that administrative group. So MetaManager allows me not only to understand my licensing environment, who has what type of capabilities and what level license, but then to make a change where appropriate to come back into compliance. Additionally, there's some other free modules available through MetaManager to help you maintain or prepare for an upgrade. We can identify orphaned accounts. With those orphaned accounts, we can then allow for any particular content to be reviewed. So I can move this somewhere else in the content store. I could move it into a recovered folders content within the team content area, or I can pick a separate location. I could even give it to a particular user, drop it into their My folders, and let them review it from there. In this case, I'll simply move this content into the recovered content folder, and then I can assign security to that content and allow another user to review that content should we need to keep it in the content store. I can also look at unowned content, so content that does not have an owner. In this case, it looks like a user's My folder. This was moved. Again, this was Carol's objects that we just moved to that recovered objects folder. And as an administrator, I can replicate user access. So if somebody calls me up and says, hey, I can't see such and such, I can go ahead, identify a particular user and say, okay, what does that user have access to within the content store? And I can see then the same things they would see, essentially replicating their user access. All of these tools can help me to clean and maintain the environment and fix and make changes when needed. And all of this is free stuff right out of the box before we've even made a purchase. Before we really start making any significant changes to the environment, best practice tells us that we should have a backup of our content store. So using MetaManager's backup module, we can create a backup of the whole of my content store, both team content and directory content. We can change this level to include all subfolders. And if we wanted to do some filtering, let's say we only wanted to keep reports or outputs, we could identify specific filters on this backup. In this case, we're going to back up the whole of the content store. So we can save this out to a file structure or a specific location. I'm going to simply save this right into my personal workstation. And I can run this backup, saving all of the content then into a MetaManager archive file. While the backup runs, some important things to note about the MetaManager backup module. I have the ability to append the timestamp to this backup so that if I'm saving multiple backups or running this off of the MetaManager scheduling feature so that I'm taking backups on a regular basis, I'm not going to overwrite the previously written backups. I'm including run history, schedules, uploaded data such as data modules or report outputs, and I'm including ancestors. So I'm saving that full file structure lineage that exists within the content store. And that's going to allow me then, when I do a restore or when I move this content elsewhere, to have that full file structure and not just dump content into one place. That allows me to have a very versatile backup file. Now that we have that restore completed, we have the ability to restore content of the smallest size to anywhere in the environment or in another environment. So this means we can be very aggressive in terms of our environment cleanup. So when we find issues, when we fix issues, when we remove content from the content store that's no longer needed, we can remove stuff and be very confident that in 3, 6, 9, 12 months, however long from now, if somebody needs one of those things that we've removed, we have a way where we can put it back live into the content store. In order to start doing this maintenance, now what MetaManager does really well is it allows us to find and fix those issues. And because we're performing this maintenance or because you're preparing for an upgrade, it's really important to understand the whole of your environment. What are those issues? What causes them? What are the reports that are or not being used? So a lot of that centers around documentation. With the canned reports module, we have a number of reports that can assist us with creating that type of documentation, again, so that we can identify an issue and then use that information to solve an issue. One of the common things related to maintenance that comes up a lot is stored outputs. If you're not diligent about removing those outputs, they can begin taking up a lot of space in your content store. So again, we can document all of the stored outputs that exist in the environment, whether they exist in my folders or team content. We're going to understand where they are, what they are, and how big they are. Meta Manager can perform this for us, and then we can use the resulting documentation to identify problematic outputs, very old outputs, and then move them to a location, other places in the content store, or remove them entirely to free up space. With the output now completed, we can see we have a variety of outputs, where they're located, and when they were created. We can also see the full search path where these objects are located. On the Output tab, in addition to creation time, we can also see size. So we can very quickly identify either old outputs or very large outputs. And then we can use that information, take it back into Meta Manager, and remove those objects. In this case, we may want to identify all objects that are, let's say, 3 years older or so. So we can sort these by oldest, and then I can identify, here's the objects that are from 2016. Let's just go ahead and remove those. So I'm going to copy the search path out of Excel. I can go back to Meta Manager and add that to my favorites. So I'll create a new folder in my favorites area. I'll call it something like Meta Manager Outputs. Then I can paste those search paths directly there from the clipboard. So now I've got all those outputs together within Meta Manager. I haven't created a folder in Cognos. This is only in Meta Manager. So I've got all those outputs together. I can highlight all of those outputs, right click, and then I'm able to delete them all from the content store. When I try and delete them, Meta Manager is going to warn me, hey, you're about to delete these from the content store, so I can be absolutely sure before I remove something. I hit the OK, and now I've done some environment cleanup. And depending on the size or number of outputs that you're working with, this can reduce your content store size significantly. We were working with a client about a year ago who removed old outputs from their content store and ended up reducing the size of their content store by almost 25% just by removing those old outputs. We also can do a lot more. It's not just stored outputs, but you can see there are a variety of different canned reports available within Meta Manager that can help us from the security audit to environment compare, security concerns, a variety of different things that help understand the environment better, and then you can make informed decisions about what to do with that content. The account security audit gives us similar information that we would gain from the license audit, but now only related to security. So who has access, what do they have access to, and where does that access come from? So we get that full lineage, that full security understanding, and then again, just like with the license output, we have the ability to edit things that we see that we may not like or that we want to change as part of our maintenance or upgrade process. With the audit now complete, I can take a look at the snapshot. Again, I load the snapshot, select the object from today, and then I can navigate into my directory and select a particular user to understand their nested membership. We can see for Charlene, we have groups in groups in groups, all the way down to the information distribution level. And that's just memberships. If I then want to understand access rights all the way down to the report level, we're going to see even more detail. So I can then understand, okay, this user Charlene, because she's in this analysis users role, has access to this audit package. And this is the type of access she has. down to this report, what type of access. Within this folder, navigate down to a particular port. Again, what type of access. And just like with the license auditor, if we want to make a change, let's say role membership here, I could edit that back in security audit. I'm going to open up the security auditor tool. I've got this user Charlene in the analysis users group within the Cognos namespace. Again, I can just highlight their name, press delete, and remove that user. So very, very quickly, I can make a change, understand it, and remove a user where they don't belong. So again, we can run a security audit. We can look at scheduled content, right? So one of the really helpful things about looking at scheduled content is understanding who uses a credential to run this schedule. How often does it run? Is it triggered? Who are the recipients? Do those recipients receive this as an email with the object attached or with a link back into Cognos, right? If we're looking at something that has actually attached a copy of a report, then that's not nearly as secure as something that contains a link back into Cognos. So all good things to look at and understand and update either prior to a Cognos upgrade or just looking at general Cognos maintenance. We can also look at security concerns, and security concerns is going to very easily just give me a list of, okay, here are users that have direct access or explicit access to some type of content or where there's some type of security anomaly that exists. Again, we'll save this to a specific output. And then run this. Again, this is going to give us information output in an Excel format that will allow us both to identify an issue and then use MetaManager on the back end to solve it. So I can see, looks like, okay, for this audit package, this object has overridden security. So all of these objects on this first page have some type of overridden security. They're no longer importing from the parent. And I might expect that for many of these folders or packages that exist on the top level of the Cognos environment, right? So within the team content, audit, boiler insight, get started, these folders I would expect perhaps have some type of explicit security. But when I start navigating down into subfolders, I would expect that for the most part, these should be inheriting security. So I can check that on the security concerns object. And then I can look, where do I have direct account access? So in this case, I can see there are a number of users that have direct access to a report or a module or even to a folder of some kind. And best practice tells me all of that should be defined at the group and role level. So if I want to just look at this project folder, again, I can copy the search path and jump into MetaManager. I'm going to use the security editor this time because we're looking at security. I can paste that search path right into the search bar to identify that object, drag it into the editing pane, and then I can see, yep, there's that user Steve that has direct access to this folder. So I can come in here, I can click the X to delete Steve, I can apply that change, and now I'm back in standards of best practice. Circling back to canned reports, you can see that there's a lot of things we can do here. But if you're looking for something a little bit more customized, the content documenter will allow you to document just about anything in your environment for just about any property: security, reports, cubes, packages, account security, account information, and general information about any object in your content store. This allows you to get specific information about specific objects related to your use case. In this case, if we're doing maintenance or preparing for an upgrade, perhaps I want to understand all of the reports in my environment, how often they're used, if they've been used at all, let's say in the last 2 years, and then who is using them. So I could very quickly run a search for all of the reports. And in this case, I just want to grab general information. That's going to grab audit database details for these specific objects. I'm going to know who owns them, where they're located, the last time they were modified, important information like that. In the same way, I can select an output for this. In this case, I'm going to save it locally again. And this is report usage from MetaManager. And I'm going to save this in Excel format. So I can go ahead and document that. Again, depending on the size of your content store, this type of documentation, especially if you've got thousands or tens of thousands of reports, could take a little bit longer. So we could utilize the MetaManager scheduling tool so we could run this documentation perhaps overnight and it'll be ready for you the next day. To schedule something, we just give the schedule a name. In this case, this is report info. And let's say we just want to run it overnight. So we can expand. Let's say we're going to run it today. I want to run it in the AM, or tomorrow in the AM, let's say 2 a.m. And let's run it at 2:30. So we're going to schedule this to run tomorrow morning at 2:30. And we create an MMX file that tells MetaManager what to do. And then this opens up into the scheduling tab. And then we've got this scheduled to run. Here it is, 4:29 at 2:30 a.m. and has not yet been executed. We could run it right now. We could attach additional tasks to run. So if we're looking, again, to document many things and we want to do all of that overnight at one time, we can do that. Or we can edit what we've created on this schedule. And all of that will run as long as the computer where MetaManager is installed is turned on. So we can see MetaManager is still working through to document all of these reports. With that report now complete, we can take a look at our report information. Again, I can see all of the different reports that were listed in my environment. I can see their run history that includes execution time, completion time. Again, if there were errors, if the report was unsuccessful, I can view those and see them in full. I can see specific report options. If there's a schedule attached for any of those objects, I can see the specific schedule. I can see that full audit detail, right? So not only when was it run or how often it was run, who ran it. And if I can start to identify reports that continually fail or reports that have a significant number of versions or outputs, I can use this information again to perform that type of maintenance. So I can say, okay, here, based on the report audit history, are the reports that are running most frequently. So I can identify my high usage reports, or I can say, okay, I've got reports in here that maybe for some reason haven't run in the past 2 years or 3 years, or going back to the beginning of your audit database. So I can use that information, and I could then also combine it with something like Report Validator. So again, I could use my Report Validator, search up all the reports that exist in my content store and validate all of these reports. Now, if I find reports that don't work, that have an error, I can compare that report list to what I've got in here, what are people using. So if I've got a high usage report that's turning an error, I know that that's something I need to have my report developers spend time on fixing. At the same time, if I find in MetaManager that I've got a report that's got some type of errors, but nobody has run that report in the last 2 years, I don't need to spend any time fixing that. I can actually just archive that. I've got it in that backup that I took earlier. I can just go ahead and remove that from the content store. Again, with the goal at the end of maintenance, at the end of cleanup, that my whole content store is clean, it's as small as possible, and runs as quickly as possible. So there's a number of maintenance related tasks that I can use here, whether I'm just cleaning up my environment or I'm preparing for the upgrade to get my environment in the best shape possible. And there's a lot more things that I can do. I can find broken reports. I can find reports not linked to a schedule. And then I can use our object editor maybe to relink a report to a package or a model. I can go ahead and understand if I've got embedded SQL. So I can use my report search tool to say, okay, what do I have in here? And I need to search, for a SQL string, and I can find reports with embedded SQL. right? Maybe I want to just understand the size of my environment. Do I have users for whatever reason that have a significant amount of content in their My folder? So I can use this content store tool. I can look at the directory. I can look, okay, here's my OpenDJ namespace. And then within there, I've got right about 30 users, but it looks like this one user, the admin, has the most, and then 2 other big offenders while everyone else falls in this other group. So I can go ahead and understand within the My folder what is going on. And it looks like in this case, they've got some old content in their My folders. And with that, they've actually got, if I dig into this, they've got a whole package that exists in here. And within that package is taking up a significant amount of space. Why does the user have a package down in their My folder? I don't know. So should we clean that up? Do we talk to that user? You can start to understand what you need to do to make that type of cleanup, but understand not only what's there, but what's in their environment. Again, I can do that similar type of documentation directly with Content Documenter. So if we come back to Content Documenter, what I can actually do is use this search path builder and say, I just want to search in a user's My folder, and I want to find all of the content that exists in a My folder. So I can build that specific search, and now I'm just going to return just a list of what's in a My folder. So I can drag that over. Again, I can document general information, who owns it, where is it at, and then again, begin to sort and filter and understand what needs to stay or not stay in the Cognos environment. So I can do all of that and much more with Meta Manager. And then when I'm complete with my upgrade or with my maintenance and I'm ready to understand, okay, how's my environment today compared to how it was before? I can use this compare tool and I can say, okay, here's the backup that I took earlier before I started doing all of my maintenance. So I can come in here, I can find where I've saved that specific backup. So here was that Meta Manager backup. And I can say I want to just compare that against the current environment now, or maybe the new environment where I've upgraded already. And then I can compare those and I can understand folder by folder, object by object, are they different? What change has been made or not made against all of these objects? So a really helpful tool, maybe comparing dev to prod, QA to prod, or before and after an upgrade to understand what has or has not changed in your environment during that time. With the comparison now complete, we can begin to understand the differences within the environment compared to the backup we took earlier. So I can see what properties are the same and what properties may be different. This can be especially helpful if we were comparing our Cognos environment against a QA environment or a test environment, and we want to understand what's different. Or in this case, we have a backup, we've made some changes, exactly what has been changed compared to when this backup was taken and what exists right now in the present time. If you'd like to know more about how to use Meta Manager or any of our other products to assist you with your Cognos maintenance or to prepare for an upgrade to the latest version of Cognos Analytics, please click the link below to find out more.